Did the silence settle first, or was it the scent of jasmine suddenly cloying that announced the end? Elena Vargas sat beside the vast carved bed, Mateo's hand still held loosely in hers. It wasn't cold yet, but the faint, rhythmic rise and fall of his chest had ceased. Outside the tall, shuttered window of the cortijo, the Andalusian sun beat down, indifferent, turning the dust motes dancing in the slanted rays into momentary diamonds. How could the world blaze so brightly when his light had gone out? Mateo Ruiz, her husband, her anchor in the unexpected harbour of late-life love, was gone. He'd been fading for months, the relentless march of cancer consuming the vibrant energy of the art historian who had seen history breathe in stone and canvas. Elena, who had once commanded stages with the sharp taconeo of her flamenco heels, had learned a different discipline. The quiet rhythm of care, the measuring of medicine, the reading aloud of poetry until his breathing eased into sleep. Elena, who had once commanded stages with the sharp taconeo of her flamenco heels, had learned a different discipline. The quiet rhythm of care, the measuring of medicine, the reading aloud of poetry until his breathing eased into peace, Their life here in this sprawling, half-forgotten country estate near Seville had been a quiet miracle. Cortijo de las Sombras, the estate of shadows, Mateo had called it, with a scholar's appreciation for its layers of Moorish whispers beneath the Andalusian whitewash. It was too large, too costly, slowly surrendering to time, but Mateo had loved its soul. He'd found Elena when she thought her dancing days, and perhaps her capacity for deep connection, were long past. He saw not the fading performer, but the enduring fire within. He gave her this house, this shared history, this peace. Now the silence in the room was immense, broken only by the distant drone of cicadas. Elena gently released Mateo's hand. His face, etched with the lines of pain and wisdom, looked serene now, as if he'd finally deciphered the last, most profound piece of art. She remembered his words from just yesterday, his voice a dry whisper, his grip surprisingly firm. Guard its spirit, Elena. Mi amor. It has watched over centuries. It holds echoes. Promise me. He hadn't explained, hadn't needed to spell out the implicit threat he felt from his own children. He'd simply trusted her. Elena stood, her body stiff, the posture ingrained from years of dance holding her upright when grief threatened to buckle her knees. She walked to the window, pushing open the heavy wooden shutters. The scent of orange blossom mingled with the jasmine, achingly sweet. Below lay the central courtyard, the fountain dry, the intricate tilework chipped and faded, the bougainvillea running wild. It was beautiful, yes, but wounded. Like her heart. Carmen, the housekeeper, a woman as weathered and sturdy as the ancient olive trees surrounding the estate, would be waiting downstairs. She would know. Elena took a deep breath, the Andalusian air thick with heat and sorrow. The guarding had begun. The funeral was a muted affair, held under the unforgiving glare of the Andalusian sun in the small village cemetery. Mateo's children, Javier and Sofia, stood beside Elena, their faces composed into masks of appropriate grief. Javier, sharp in a dark suit that looked out of place in the rustic setting, kept glancing at his watch. Sofia, elegant but severe, dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, though Elena sensed more performance than pain. Sofia's husband, Ricardo Marquez, hovered nearby, his expression smooth, offering murmured condolences that felt rehearsed. Elena felt a chasm between herself and them, wider than the few feet of dusty ground separating them. They were Mateo's blood, his past. She was his present, his love, the woman he had chosen to share his final years with, here in the quiet embrace of the cortijo. Carmen stood a little apart, her face granite, her black dress stark against the whitewashed tombs. Her loyalty was a silent, solid presence Elena clung to. Later that week, the will reading took place in the cool, dark office of Mateo's lawyer in Seville. Senor Ramirez, solemn and precise, adjusted his glasses. Elena sat beside Javier, Sofia, and Ricardo, the tension in the room palpable beneath the whirring ceiling fan. The lawyer read through the preliminary clauses, bequests of specific artworks to museums, smaller sums of money and investments divided equally between Javier and Sofia. Elena felt Javier relax slightly beside her. Perhaps he thought the main asset would follow suit. Then came the clause concerning the Cortijo de las Sombras. Senor Ramirez cleared his throat. To my beloved wife, Elena Vargas, he read, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet room, I leave in its entirety the property known as Cortijo de las Sombras, including all land, buildings, and contents therein. It is my deepest wish," the lawyer continued, reading Mateo's own words now, "that she cherish and preserve its unique history and spirit, which she understands as no other." Silence. Elena felt rather than saw the shift beside her. Javier went rigid. Sophia gasped, a sharp intake of breath that cut through the stillness. Ricardo's smooth facade cracked, replaced by a look of utter disbelief, quickly morphing into anger. "This is preposterous," Javier exploded, slamming his hand on the polished desk. He couldn't have been in his right mind. Sophia turned on Elena, her eyes narrowed. "What did you do? How did you manipulate him?" "Senora Vargas," Ricardo began, his voice dangerously soft, regaining control. "Clearly there has been some undue influence. My father-in-law was ill, perhaps not fully cognizant." Elena felt numb, the accusations washing over her like a cold wave. Mateo's careful provisions, his trust, twisted into something ugly. "Mateo knew exactly what he was doing," she said, her voice low but steady. "He loved the Cortijo. He wanted it protected." "Protected?" Javier scoffed. "It's a ruin, a money pit. It needs to be sold, developed. That's the only sensible thing." The lawyer held up a hand. "The will is quite clear, and I assure you, Don Mateo was perfectly lucid when he signed it. I have medical attestations to that effect." But Javier and Sophia weren't listening. They saw only the crumbling estate, the potential millions slipping through their fingers into the hands of the woman they clearly viewed as an interloper, a gold digger. As they left the office, Ricardo lagging slightly behind, he gave Elena a look that promised trouble. "This isn't over, Senora," he murmured. Not by a long shot. Back at the Cortijo, the shadows seemed deeper, the silence heavier. The fight Mateo had tried to shield her from had arrived. The days following the will reading bled into one another, thick with grief and a growing sense of unease. Elena moved through the echoing rooms of the Cortijo like a ghost herself. She'd light candles before the small photograph of Mateo on the mantelpiece, his eyes crinkling at the corners, and whisper the fragments of conversation she couldn't bear to lose. But the peace she sought was elusive, poisoned by the memory of Javier's fury, Sophia's accusation, Ricardo's veiled threat. They didn't wait long. A week later, a sleek car crunched onto the gravel driveway. Javier and Sophia emerged, Ricardo conspicuously absent this time. Elena met them in the vast tiled entrance hall, Carmen a silent sentinel just inside the doorway to the kitchens. "Elena," Javier began, dispensing with pleasantries, his tone brisk, businesslike. "We need to talk. Reasonably." "Reasonably," Elena echoed, bitterness touching her voice for the first time. "Like accusing me of manipulating your dying father?" Sophia flushed. "We were upset. It was a shock. But Javier is right. This situation is untenable." "The Cortijo is falling apart," Javier stated flatly. "It costs a fortune to maintain, even in this state. You can't possibly afford it alone. We have a developer interested, a very good offer. We sell, split the proceeds 3 ways. It's fair. It's logical." "Fair?" Elena felt a spark ignite within the numbness. "Your father left it to me. He asked me to preserve it. Selling it, letting a developer tear it down for luxury apartments, that's not preservation, that's desecration." "Don't be sentimental," Javier snapped. "Sentiment doesn't pay bills. Father was a romantic, an academic. He didn't live in the real world." "He lived here," Elena countered, her voice gaining strength. "He loved every stone, every cracked tile. He saw the history you seem so eager to pave over." "We are his children," Sophia interjected, her voice rising. "This place, this land, it's our birthright. He owed it to us, not to you." The unspoken outsider hung heavy in the air. "He owed you his love, which he gave freely, even when you barely seemed to notice," Elena said quietly. "He owed me nothing but the companionship we chose, and he gave me his heart, his trust, and this house. I intend to honor that trust." Javier stepped closer, his face hardening. "Then you leave us no choice. We will contest the will. Undue influence, lack of testamentary capacity. It will get messy, Elena. Expensive, public. Is that what you want, to drag Mateo's name through the mud?" The threat, blatant and ugly, struck her like a physical blow. She felt Carmen shift behind her, a low murmur of indignation. Elena looked from Javier's cold eyes to Sophia's resentful pout. She saw their father in the shape of their faces, but nothing of his warmth, his depth, his reverence for beauty and the past. "Leave," Elena said, the word barely a whisper, yet carrying the weight of finality. "Leave my house." They stared, momentarily taken aback by her quiet command. Then Javier sneered. "Fine, you'll hear from our lawyers." They turned and walked out, the heavy oak door closing behind them with a thud that echoed the closing of a chapter. Elena leaned back against the cool plaster wall, trembling. The battle lines were drawn. In the oppressive quiet that followed their departure, Elena felt the full weight of her isolation. Grief was a familiar shadow, but this new fear, the fear of legal battles, of public scrutiny, of losing the very sanctuary Mateo had entrusted to her, was a chilling presence. She sought out Carmen, finding her in the large rustic kitchen, polishing old copper pans with fierce concentration. "Vultures," Carmen muttered without looking up, her knuckles white. "Circling before the man is even cold in his grave. Don Mateo, bless his soul, he saw it coming. He worried." "He told me to guard its spirit, Carmen," Elena confessed, sinking onto a sturdy wooden stool. "But how? Against his own children? With lawyers, money I don't have?" Carmen finally turned, wiping her hands on her apron. Her dark eyes, usually twinkling with wry humour, were sharp with empathy. "Don Mateo didn't leave you helpless, Senora. He left you this." She gestured around the kitchen, encompassing the whole house. "This place, it has strength, and so do you. Remember who you are. Remember who you are." The words resonated. Elena wasn't just Mateo's widow. She was Elena Vargas, who had poured sweat and tears onto wooden floors, mastering the intricate rhythms of flamenco, demanding discipline from every muscle, every nerve. She had faced down demanding audiences, pushed through injuries, survived the lonely years after her brief, disastrous first marriage. Hadn't that forged a different kind of strength? Over the next few weeks, Elena began to truly explore the Cortijo, not just as Mateo's companion, but as its potential guardian. She walked the overgrown paths, tracing the faded geometric patterns of Moorish tiles in the neglected courtyards. She pushed open creaking doors to rooms layered in dust, sunlight striping across forgotten furniture draped in white cloths. In Mateo's study, surrounded by his books on art and history, she found folders filled with his research on the Cortijo itself, its origins tracing back centuries, notes on architectural details, even tentative sketches for restoration he must have dreamed of, but never had the resources to attempt. In Mateo's study, surrounded by his books on art and history, she found folders filled with his research on the Cortijo itself, its origins tracing back centuries, notes on architectural details, even tentative sketches for restoration he must have dreamed of but never occasioned. She discovered a small walled garden hidden behind the main house, choked with weeds, but centered around a dry, intricately carved marble fountain. As she cleared away the stubborn vines, the delicate beauty of the stonework emerged. It felt like uncovering a secret, a piece of the Cortijo's soul Mateo had wanted her to find. The official letter from the children's lawyer arrived as promised, thick, creamy paper detailing the legal challenge, citing Mateo's failing health, Elena's relatively short marriage, her opportunistic influence. It was designed to intimidate, to overwhelm. Reading it, Elena felt a wave of cold fear. They could paint her as anything they wished. Local gossip, Carmen confirmed grimly, had already begun. Whispers of the younger second wife who had charmed the old man out of his family inheritance. Doubt gnawed at her. Could she fight this? Could she bear the whispers, the legal costs, the potential humiliation? She sat by the newly cleared fountain one evening, the air cooling, fragrant with night-blooming jasmine. She closed her eyes, remembering the feeling of the stage beneath her feet, the surge of power as music filled her, the absolute focus required. Passion requires strength, she thought. Endurance, defiance. Mateo hadn't just left her a house, he'd left her a challenge, a final act of faith in her spirit. Slowly, a new resolve began to harden within her, displacing the fear. This wasn't just about defending her inheritance. It was about defending Mateo's legacy, the Cortijo's history, and her own right to define her future. Current part characters, 3,991 total characters, 14,458. The confrontation, when it came, felt inevitable, like the gathering of a summer storm over the Andalusian plains. Elena had received another letter, this one proposing a meeting at the Cortijo to discuss a final amicable settlement. She knew there would be nothing amicable about it. She asked Carmen to prepare coffee in the main salon, a grand room with a high, beamed ceiling and tall windows overlooking the neglected front gardens, but to remain discreetly within earshot. Elena chose her dress carefully, simple black, but she pinned her dark, silver-streaked hair up with the severity of a dancer preparing for performance, adding a pair of old silver earrings Matteo had loved. She needed every ounce of composure. Javier arrived first, alone this time, his manner curt. Ricardo followed a few minutes later, oozing a calculated charm that Elena found repulsive. Sophia, pointedly, did not come. Sophia felt it best we handle this man-to-man, so to speak, Ricardo said smoothly, taking a seat without being invited. Less emotion involved. Elena remained standing near the tall fireplace, its carved stone cool against her hand. Say what you came to say, Ricardo. Ricardo leaned forward, placing a sleek leather briefcase on the antique table between them. Elena, let's be practical. The legal route will be protracted, unpleasant, and ruinously expensive for you. We estimate your legal fees alone could exceed the value of any minor assets Matteo left you. He paused for effect. We, on the other hand, have resources. Javier chimed in. Our lawyers are confident. Matteo's health records, the timing, it doesn't look good for you. So, Ricardo continued, opening the briefcase. He slid a single document across the table. We are prepared to offer you a final sum. Consider it a gesture of goodwill to avoid further distress. He named a figure, substantial perhaps to someone destitute, but Elena knew instinctively it was a fraction of the Cortijo's potential land value, especially to the developers Javier was courting. Sign this, renounce all claims to the estate, and you walk away clear. We handle the sale, the lawyers, everything. It's clean, it's generous under the circumstances. Elena looked from the document to their expectant faces. Javier's impatient, Ricardo's smoothly predatory. She thought of Matteo's hand in hers, his whispered plea. She thought of the hidden fountain, the centuries etched into the stones around her. She thought of the discipline, the fire she once commanded on stage. No, she said, the word clear and resonant in the large room. Javier stared. No? Are you insane? This is your last chance. Ricardo's smile tightened. Perhaps you misunderstand the gravity of your situation, Elena. Oh, I understand perfectly, Elena replied, stepping away from the fireplace, her posture erect. I understand that you see only land value, profit margins. You see a burden. I see legacy. I see beauty. I see Matteo's soul bound up in these walls. She gestured around the room. And you think I would sell that for this? She flicked a dismissive finger towards the document. What will you do then? Javier demanded, incredulous. Live here alone until the roof caves in? Beg for charity? A flicker of an idea, born from Matteo's scattered notes and her own rediscovery of the place, solidified into purpose. I will stay, she declared, her voice ringing with newfound conviction. I will fight your lawsuit, and I will restore this Cortijo. Perhaps, she added, the idea taking flight, I will turn part of it into a small foundation. A place to study Andalusian art history, perhaps offer workshops for traditional crafts, keep Matteo's library accessible to scholars. Something that honors him, something that breathes life back into these walls instead of tearing them down. The sheer audacity of her plan left them speechless for a moment. Then Ricardo laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. With what money, Elena? Dreams don't pay for masons and lawyers. I don't know yet, she admitted honestly, but I will find a way. Matteo trusted me to guard its spirit. I won't fail him. Now please leave. This time, there was no mistaking the finality in her tone. Javier looked furious, Ricardo coldly calculating, assessing this unexpected resistance. Without another word, they collected the unsigned document and strode out of the salon, leaving Elena standing tall in the center of the room, the sunlight catching the silver in her hair. The air vibrated with the aftershock of confrontation, but beneath the fear a strange, fierce joy was beginning to bloom. She had found her footing. Current part characters 46 and 11 characters 19,068. The heavy front door slammed shut, the sound swallowed by the Cortijo's thick walls. Elena stood motionless for a long moment, the adrenaline fading, leaving behind a bone-deep wariness and the terrifying enormity of her declaration. Restore the Cortijo? Create a foundation? The words had flown out, fueled by defiance, but the reality was daunting. Where would she even begin? Carmen appeared silently at the doorway, her face alight with fierce pride. Bien hecho, Senora, she whispered. "Well done. Don Matteo would be clapping in heaven." Elena managed a weak smile. "He would also be asking how I plan to pay for it, Carmen." "1 stone at a time, Signora," Carmen said practically. "Like building a cathedral. 1 prayer, 1 stone. 1 stone at a time." The phrase echoed in Elena's mind as she walked through the silent house later that day. The threats from Javier and Ricardo still hung in the air, a promise of legal battles and financial strain. But something had shifted within her. The cortijo no longer felt like just a beautiful, burdensome inheritance. It felt like a mission, a purpose rising from the ashes of her grief. It was a way to keep Matteo close, to actively engage with the history he cherished, to channel her own long-dormant creative energy into something tangible, enduring. Her steps took her back to the hidden walled garden. The afternoon sun warmed the ancient stones of the fountain. Kneeling, she began, quite simply, to pull weeds, her hands digging into the dry earth, clearing the base of the structure. It was mindless work, yet deeply grounding. As she worked, fragments of flamenco rhythms tapped in her memory, complex patterns demanding precision, strength, and unwavering focus. This, she realized, was a different kind of choreography. Days turned into weeks. There were no more visits from the children, only the ominous silence that preceded legal maneuvers. Elena hired a local lawyer Senor Ramirez recommended, a woman named Isabella, sharp-eyed and practical, who reviewed the threatening letter and Matteo's will. "They might try," Isabella said calmly, "but Don Matteo was thorough. We have strong grounds to defend his wishes. It will take time, and yes, money. We should explore options for historical preservation grants." Elena began meticulously sorting through Matteo's study. Boxes of notes, photographs, architectural drawings, correspondence with historians. It was a treasure trove, documenting not just the cortijo's past, but Matteo's passion. She found detailed plans he'd sketched for restoring the main salon's faded ceiling frescoes, notes on the original irrigation system for the gardens, research into local artisans skilled in traditional tile work and plastering. He had dreamt of this long before her arrival. She started small, reclaiming spaces from dust and neglect. With Carmen's help, she aired out rooms, polished tarnished silver, washed grime from windows until the Andalusian light flooded in. She spent hours in the walled garden, clearing, pruning, coaxing life back into the dormant soil around the fountain. She contacted the historical society Isabella had mentioned, sending them copies of Matteo's research. One afternoon, while cleaning cobwebs from a high archway in the main courtyard, she paused, looking up at the intricate plasterwork, chipped but still elegant. She felt a profound sense of connection, to Matteo, to the generations who had lived and dreamed within these walls, to the enduring beauty that defied time and neglect. The fear hadn't vanished entirely. The challenges loomed large. The lawsuit still threatened, the funds were non-existent. But it was overshadowed now by a quiet determination. She wasn't just Matteo's widow, passively defending her inheritance. She was Elena Vargas, custodian of Cortijo de las Sombras. She straightened her shoulders, the dancer's posture returning instinctively. She picked up her broom. There was work to be done. 1 stone, 1 prayer, 1 steady step at a time. The future was uncertain, perhaps perilous, but it was hers to shape here, under the watchful Andalusian sun, within the embrace of these ancient, resilient walls. The spirit of the place and her own was beginning to stir. The rhythm of life at the cortijo settled into a new pattern, marked by small acts of reclamation rather than anxious waiting. Elena rose early, the cool morning air carrying the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke. She would work alongside Carmen for hours, scrubbing floors, polishing woodwork, tending the burgeoning life in the walled garden, where water now trickled tentatively back into the cleaned fountain. In the afternoons, she dedicated herself to Matteo's study, immersing herself in his notes, organizing his research, drafting letters to cultural foundations and potential patrons. Isabella had identified. The legal battle simmered in the background. Isabella handled the correspondence, shielding Elena from the worst of the procedural wrangling, but the financial drain was real and constant. Elena sold a few pieces of jewellery Matteo had given her, items she treasured, but knew he would understand. It was seed money, an investment in the larger dream. News travels fast in small communities. Elena felt the subtle shifts when she went into the nearby village for supplies. Some regarded her with curiosity, others with a veiled pity, assuming the wealthy children would inevitably win. But there were also nods of respect, particularly from older residents who remembered Matteo fondly and admired Elena's quiet defiance. The local baker started slipping an extra pastry into her bag. The owner of the small hardware shop offered advice on restoring old wood. These small kindnesses were anchors in the uncertainty. One sweltering afternoon, while sorting through a dusty trunk in an unused storeroom, Elena found something unexpected. A collection of old flamenco posters, brittle with age, featuring a much younger Elena Vargas. Beneath them lay several pairs of her old dancing shoes, worn smooth, the heels scarred from countless hours of practice. She hadn't looked at them in years. Sitting on the dusty floor, she picked up a shoe, the worn leather familiar in her hand. A wave of complex emotion washed over her. Nostalgia, regret for dreams not fully realized, but also a fierce pride in the discipline, the passion, the sheer hard work those shoes represented. She had poured her soul into that art, just as Matteo had poured his into history. Perhaps, she mused, preservation and performance weren't so different after all. Both required dedication, reverence for form, and the courage to bring something beautiful into the light. Inspired, she took the shoes back to her room. That evening, after Carmen had retired, Elena stood before the long mirror in the quiet salon. Slowly, tentatively, she slipped her feet into the old shoes. They felt tight, unfamiliar yet deeply known. She stood straight, finding her center, remembering the posture. A simple floreo, the graceful rotation of the wrist, felt rusty. She tried a basic zapateado, the rhythmic tapping of heel and toe. The sound was muffled on the old rug, hesitant, but it was there. A ghost of the dancer stirred within the custodian. It wasn't about reclaiming the past, she understood, but about integrating its strength into the present. The discipline she learned then was the discipline she needed now. A few weeks later, a small victory arrived. A letter from a regional cultural foundation expressed interest in Matteo's research and Elena's proposal. They requested a site visit. It wasn't funding yet, not by a long shot, but it was a spark. Elena read the letter aloud to Carmen in the kitchen, her voice trembling slightly. Carmen beamed. "You see, Signora, 1 stone." That evening Elena walked out into the courtyard as twilight painted the sky in shades of bruised purple and fiery orange. The air was soft, carrying the scent of jasmine. The fountain murmured. She looked up at the silhouette of the cortijo against the darkening sky. Solid, enduring, scarred but beautiful. The fight was far from over. The path ahead remained steep and uncertain. But standing there, rooted to the place Matteo had loved, feeling the echo of her own past strength, Elena felt not fear, but a quiet, burgeoning hope. She was home, and she was ready. Current part characters 4437. Total characters 27 and 6707. The site visit from the Cultural Foundation marked a turning point, not just practically, but psychologically. 2 representatives, a serious-looking historian named Dr. Alarcón and a younger architect, Ms. Romero, spent a full day at the cortijo. Elena, nervous but resolute, guided them through the estate. She didn't try to hide the decay. Instead, she pointed out the potential, sharing Matteo's research, highlighting the unique blend of Moorish and Renaissance elements, explaining her vision for a living preservation, not a sterile museum, but a place of study and perhaps quiet creativity. She showed them the main salon with its faded frescoes, the library filled with Matteo's books, the intricate tilework in the courtyards, the hidden garden and its restored fountain. She spoke of Matteo's passion with quiet conviction, and of her own commitment, rooted both in love for him and a growing reverence for the place itself. Carmen served them simple refreshments, local cheese, olives, fresh bread in the shaded loggia, her quiet dignity adding to the atmosphere of authenticity. Dr. Alarcón listened intently, occasionally asking sharp questions about historical records or structural integrity. Ms. Romero sketched rapidly in a notebook, her eyes scanning arches and rooflines. When they left, they offered no promises, only a formal, "We will be in touch after our review." But Elena felt a subtle shift in their demeanor throughout the day, a growing respect replacing their initial professional reserve. The wait for their decisions stretched through the late summer heat. Meanwhile, Isabella reported that Javier and Ricardo's lawyers were filing preliminary motions. attempting to freeze any potential sale or alteration of the property pending the will contest. It was a tactic designed to paralyze Elena, to increase the pressure. "They are betting you will run out of resources or resolve," Isabella advised. "We must continue to show forward momentum, however small." Elena focused on what she could control. She drew on her dancer's discipline, establishing a strict routine. Mornings were for physical work on the estate, clearing another overgrown section, patching crumbling plaster with materials suggested by the village hardware store owner, meticulously cleaning Matteo's collection of antique ceramics. Afternoons were for research, grant writing, correspondence. Evenings were for quiet reflection, sometimes practicing those flamenco steps in the salon, not for performance, but for centering herself, feeling the strength in her own body echo the resilience of the ancient walls around her. One evening, sorting through the last of Matteo's desk drawers,